in the WallBuilders library, and actually, I guess it was just a few weeks ago, we did a mini tour here in the museum, and we talk about how we get new stuff in every single week, and so we've gotten a lot of new stuff in. So we thought we might just show some of the new stuff we've got in, some of the cool things.
It's kind of like we showed you before all the different sections, World War II and education, founding fathers and religion, and we're just going to kind of go through the sections with brand new stuff that's come in. It really is some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, so starting in kind of a little bit of the entertainment section,
Police Gazette. What's a Police Gazette doing? What? The Police Gazette?
Now this is from 1886.
1886 of the Police Gazette in the entertainment section?
So what would the entertainment be? Well, maybe just flip to the back side of that.
All right.
What's on the back side?
Oh, it's all centered around that boy. William F. Cody, Buffalo Bill.
And you see down here at the bottom, it's his Wild West. Now, a lot of people today know about Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Well, it wasn't called a show necessarily back then. It just actually was a show. So the title was actually the Wild West. What's significant about this piece, though, is this individual right up here. This is Annie Oakley. Now, why that's significant is there are very, very few times that Annie Oakley's picture ever appeared in any publication. This is one of those publications, which makes it fairly unique. And actually, we've done a piece on our Facebook page you can go and see on Annie Oakley, giving a little details, a little history of her, some fun information. Most people don't know much about Annie Oakley.
Well, now you said that she's not, you don't get many pictures of her, but we got another picture of her this last week as well. And it's right here.
And it's a little more unique, too. Now, this is a wooden board.
You can see this. That's wooden. And this came off the side of a wagon. So, you know, think back to covered wagon kind of days. And these are the panels that went down the side of the wagon, except this is the wagon in Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And it's an advertising wagon. So as they go through town and bring their stuff in, it's advertising. And part of the advertisement is...
this right here, very, very faded, but this is Annie Oakley. You can kind of see her face right there. You can see a little bit more down below of part of her dress. But this was Annie Oakley in that advertisement. Over here, very faded. You have Buffalo Bill and then some other entertainers from the Wild West. But this came off the actual wagon where they were highlighting and really trying to publicize the Wild West so people would come and see that show. So these are some new things we've gotten in related to Annie Oakley, some of that entertainment, some of that history section.
This is Annie Oakley stuff down here, and it's some stuff that you see covered on that short video we've got on Annie Oakley, but one of her show guns that she used back there, an award gun that she gave, and different targets that she shot, and etc. So, fun stuff.
Let's jump to another section. We have more stuff over here.
Now this is the president's, and this table right here is, this piece right here, this is Teddy Roosevelt, this is in the White House, and so it's a good place to set some of this presidential stuff we've got in the last couple of weeks. This one is kind of fun. This is the letter from James Buchanan. James Buchanan had just been elected president, and he almost died before he got inaugurated because he was in the National Hotel in Washington, D.C., and they had an outbreak of sickness that killed 30 people there at the hotel. So he almost didn't make his inauguration. He did, but one of the guys who got killed was one of his nephews. His nephew died in this thing.
It actually killed 30 people.
30 people, including 3 congressmen.
Three congressmen. And actually, when he first got sick, they thought it was an assassination attempt because you have all these people getting sick, the president getting sick, and so what in the world's going on? Well, the back of the story is kind of fun and gross at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
Because what they found was actually there were lead pipes, and the lead pipe had actually cracked, and the sewage was coming into the water line that was going to the hotel right by the kitchen. So everybody that was eating and drinking at that hotel had sewage in the food that was being washed had water in the food. And so they had dysentery. They actually thought it was a cholera outbreak at first, but dysentery, I mean, just awful. So he got really sick, actually stayed sick for a while, but one of his nephews was there with him and actually got sick and died during that occasion.
And so he writes, apparently the brother, his nephew, but the brother of the nephew that died, he writes him. And I'm just going to read part of it on the back here because he's talking about, look, when you're facing death, you want to know God. And he says, right here, he says, for my own part, the longer I live, the more deeply I'm comforted with the great truths of religion. In the midst of innumerable cases and vast responsibilities, I endeavor to put my trust in God and ask from wisdom on high. I am a firm believer in the Christian systems and that salvation alone can be purchased by faith in the merits and atonement of the Lord Jesus Christ. May I ask you to read the Bible? Now, this is the brother of the guy who died. May I ask you to read the Bible, and especially the New Testament, to reflect upon the doctrines which it contains, and to be regular and devout in your attendance at church. I scarcely know a circumstance which would more afford me more heart pleasure than to know that you were a religious man. So here is the President of the United States talking to the brother of his nephew that died.
Which is his nephew. So he's writing to one of...
a family member.
Yeah, it's writing to a nephew, and the other nephew died. And it's interesting that in the midst of heartache, what he's saying for consolation is go to the Bible, connect in faith, go to Jesus, and this is from a president saying this is what you need to do in this situation.
And President Buchanan, which I've got to say, most people would never have associated President Buchanan with a strong Christian faith, but that letter right there, we just got in this week.
No, or speaking of presidents and faith, this is another letter. This is from President Herbert Hoover. Now, down here at the bottom, it's June 26, 1962. What is significant is that in 1962, the U.S. Supreme Court came out with a ruling that said voluntary prayer was unconstitutional in public schools. That
voluntary prayer.
Students could not choose to pray if they wanted to, because if prayer were in public schools, that would violate the separation of church and state. And the Supreme Court really blew it with that decision, as they have in many other decisions throughout history. But this is a letter that Herbert Hoover wrote in response. Here's what he said. This interpretation of the Constitution by the Supreme Court on prayer in our schools is a disintegration of one of the most sacred of American heritage. The Congress should at once submit an amendment to the Constitution which establishes the right to religious devotion in all government agencies, national, state, or local. And then signed down here, Herbert Hoover. So certainly a different opinion on this notion of separation of church and state, or even public prayer, specifically the
And he was the President of the United States back in the 30s, and we're talking a decision in the 60s. So 30 years later, he's saying, hey, let's get a constitutional amendment, stop this attack on religion, not a secular America. So that's remarkable.
From a president.
We've got all these other presidents, and you'll recognize that president. That's pretty easy to recognize. But the picture itself is fairly amazing. This picture came from the collection of the guy who did the Washington Monument. So this is one of the images that you can use to say, here's what the monument needs to look like. So the guy who did the Washington Monument, this is collected. Now, interesting, I wonder where he got this image, because, you know, the monument's done certainly long after Lincoln is dead.
It actually came from right here. This is the glass negative. I'm going to hold it up maybe with a little light behind it. You can see it better. That is the actual negative from that image of Lincoln, which is just amazing the way they were able to do that, the way they were able to pull that off. But that is the negative of that picture of Lincoln. So very delicate. We actually try to keep this put up most of the time, and I'm going to be very careful putting it up. We can't run down
and by the way, you see us handle documents and things, and we don't have white gloves on. And that's specifically because when you're handling soft things like that, you need the sensitivity in your fingers to be able to feel where the edges are so that it doesn't break. So not having gloves actually spares the documents. Now, we're careful where we touch them, because you don't want the oil from your fingers getting into the ink and etc.
There are times when we use gloves,
times.
just not in these situations.
That's right.
Now, here's one that is really fun. Why don't you tell about this?
This one is part of the Emancipation Proclamation Abraham Lincoln did in 1863. And this tiny little thing, see, it's a little pin. You can see the back of it there. And you can pin this on, and it's got this little thing right here that says, "Millions for freedom, not one penny for slavery." Now, that goes back to the Barbary Powers War when we were fighting Muslims under Thomas Jefferson, and the thing was millions for defense, but not one penny for tribute.
Because we were having to pay the Muslims at that time to not intercept, to not attack our trade ships, to leave us alone, more or less. And Jefferson said, okay, I'll pay whatever we have to pay to fight these guys to get freedom, but I'm not gonna keep paying them tribute.
That's right.
To not attack us anymore.
Not one penny for tribute.
So Abraham Lincoln has this kind of throwback, or at least this during Abraham Lincoln's time is a throwback to that Jefferson thought of millions for freedom, but not one penny for tribute. Well, this was not one penny for slavery, which is certainly an interesting piece of history. But something, again, from presidents related to that in the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, we had a question come in.
So Kevin asked, why were there so many amendments to the Constitution in our history and so few, if any, in the last 50 years?
Well, now, a couple of things. It's not as many as you might think, because we only have 27 amendments to the Constitution. 27 amendments to the Constitution is what we got. there have been more than 10,000 proposed since the time of the Constitution, and 10 of those amendments to the Constitution came within 2 years, and another 2 had come by 1804. So nearly half the amendments to the Constitution had come within about 15 years after the Constitution. Then you really go a long time. You go from about 1804 up until about 1865. Then you get 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. Then you jump again into the really about 1913 time frame. And then you get some there, but it's not all that much as we would think. And by the way, the most recent amendment to the Constitution was ratified in 1992. It was one of the original 12 amendments proposed as a Bill of Rights. But it didn't get enough states to ratify it then, but states kept ratifying it. And it's the one that says, James Madison and First Congress put together, said, a congressman cannot get a pay raise he votes for himself until he's faced the electors in an election. So that's the 27th Amendment, and that was added in 1992, but it was written back in 1789.
And it's a very hard process to get amendments done. And the Founding Fathers actually intended that because they didn't want a constitution that was changed by just the whims or emotions, desires of people.
Which again, 10,000 proposed amendments, only 27 have made it. It's a hard process.
So by design, it was supposed to be very difficult to change kind of what they considered a foundation that we were building a nation on, even though that not all the Founding Fathers even believed that the Constitution would last throughout their lifetime because they'd never seen that before.
That's right.
But they thought, we don't want to make it so flippant that people can just, whenever they feel like different, well, we're going to throw this out, do something else. They made it intentionally something that you had to work hard and get a lot of approval from a lot of states to be able to change the Constitution.
Now, I think the question may come off of this because Herbert Hoover's saying, let's get the constitutional amendment. It's interesting what Herbert Hoover's saying here is, look, we got to protect religious expressions in government, etc. Actually, a little more than 20 years ago, I got put on by a congressman with about a dozen of us to come up with this kind of a constitutional amendment. And so we worked at the Committee on Judiciary. We had Committee on the Constitution, Committee on Judiciary, Subcommittee on the Constitution held hearings all across the country to get a constitutional amendment because at that point in time, they're saying you can't have even silent prayer in schools, you can't have voluntary silent prayer, you can't have nativity scenes. All the stuff we'd had for 200 years is going away. So even then, we worked hard to get it and didn't get it done because it does take 2/3 of the House and Senate and 3/4 of the states, and that's just hard to get over.
Another question from Mark. He says, what is your very oldest American document?
Oldest? Oh, American documents. We got some documents 1,000 years old that pertain to America, but they're not American documents.
And I guess it depends on how we define American document because the oldest document that belonged to Americans wasn't originally printed in America, but it belonged to probably the Geneva Bible would be my thought.
Yeah, well, we have the Geneva Bible from 1590 that was brought to America, so that's an American document.
By a Puritan family.
But nobody was really in America in 1590, so, you know, they came in the 1630s. So it was a 40-year-old Bible for them when they came. But that's probably the oldest one we have related to America is 1590. It's printed in London, then brought here by the Arthur Upton family. So that'd be the oldest American. But we got some things that relate to Bible in America that go back 1,000 years that was part of the process of how the Bible got to America.
But several things related to the Pilgrims that we have several things from that era. And so that really is, as far as America is concerned, that's really as far back as you can go in American history pretty much. As far as documents are concerned. So we have stuff from early America. All right, so speaking of early America, this is a picture.
Not that one yet. Got to do this one. This is the one you get to see. Everybody recognize that, right? We know what that is.
That is the Texas State Capitol.
That's exactly. Well, you know, Texas State Capitol is the only capitol in the United States taller than the U.S. Capitol. So why would we say that in Texas? We got an attitude, don't we? So here's the U.S. Capitol, but you would not have recognized, because everybody knows this, you would not have recognized that one of the very first printings of the U.S. Capitol is 1842, and this is it. Now, how many people would have recognized that as the U.S. Capitol? That's the U.S. Capitol in 1842. Didn't have the dome, didn't have the wing extensions on it at all. And you see the difference between the two, but that's a newspaper we just got in, and that's from 1842 showing the U.S. Capitol at that point in time. And it did take, by the way, that the dome was finally added in 1863, finished, so that's the final real major shift of the Capitol. Now, go back to the beginning of American independence.
Yeah, so we just got this in, and this is a signature from John Nixon. Now, John Nixon...
Was that the cousin of President Nixon?
He could have a cousin named John. I have no idea if that's true or not. I don't know much about Nixon other than there was some peace, and then he actually peaced out.
No, that wasn't peace. That was a victory. That was his...
No, that became peace because he was gone. But John Nixon, so I didn't know much about this, and actually I've been learning about this, but John Nixon is someone who is kind of a known name in American history, but I didn't know who it was.
Well, here he is. There's a picture of John Nixon right there. Now, that help you recognize him? That's John Nixon.
And if you don't know who that is, you can go back to an old history book, and here you have the Lossing, Volume 2, and in this, he actually talks about John Nixon and who he was and what he did. So this is something that history books used to cover. Today, I've never heard that name before. I didn't know who that was.
Well, he's got something in his hand that he's reading. And what he has in his hand is the original of this. Now, when the Declaration of Independence was done on the 4th of July, it looked like this. This is a copy of that. They found an original copy. They made this duplicate of it. So this is a copy of the 4th of July. Only 2 names on it, John Hancock, Charles Thompson. There's no signatures on it. Those signatures weren't added until much later, about August the 2nd. So several weeks later is when they added it. But this was done on the 4th of July. On the 8th of July, 4 days later, they take this outside. John Nixon takes this outside, and at noon on that day, he stands outside and reads it to the people of the United States. This is the first reading of the Declaration of Independence publicly, and John Nixon, where's John's signature?
So the first time the American people heard it, they heard it from John Nixon as he's standing up and reading the Declaration of Independence of why we are separated from Great Britain with those 27 grievances listed. And so this is from the guy that read the Declaration out loud for America for the very first time.
And that's what he was reading. This is the copy of what he was reading. That's exactly what it looked like because they made a duplicate from the one from 200 years ago.
Looks like we have another question.
Sarah asked, are there any history textbooks, classical or contemporary, that you highly recommend for school-aged children?
There's a couple answers to that question.
Yeah, the problem is school-aged children becomes difficult because what used to be elementary school textbooks are now
college,
almost collegiate level
right.
textbooks. So a lot of the good history textbooks that I could think of and identify, and you probably know more, would be things that would be very difficult for most students today to be able to go through. In fact, we were meeting with a pastor just earlier this week, and we were talking about one of those early history textbooks, and he says, I had to read it with a dictionary beside me, and every page I was having to look up words I didn't know, and that was from an elementary textbook.
Yeah.
And this is a full-grown man as a pastor who didn't know these words, and so there's some really great history books out there.
And one of them that goes back, it was done in the 1870s and 80s for public schools, is by a guy named Charles Coffin, like funeral, like a coffin. And he did, I think, 6 or 7 books, and they start back with Columbus and go forward. And so there's a story of liberty and the sound of liberty and sweet land of liberty. And Charles Coffin, really good books. But, you know, it depends on the age of the kids. I mean,
but those are things that probably you can find on Google Books.
Oh, yeah.
You can get online and you can read
and
those
some
in
have
Google
been
Books.
reprinted as well.
And so that's something that really you can look and you can find some of those there. And there's several others. We talked about Lossing, but Coffin is a really good example. There's also another one called Lives of the Signers, which is a series.
And we have that on WallBuilders.com.
That's right, and that's something they can purchase. There was initially a couple different volumes done of Lives of the Signers. Some that, what is it? One's a 12 volume, I think.
Hey, come with us real quick. Let me show you. Come in here.
All right, I'll get the lights.
You get the lights. We'll go over here. Now, what you got right here, all right, you want to know, teaching American history, what are good textbooks? Here's what we used to do right there. See that? What it was, these are biographies. You got Boone and Calhoun and Webster and Clay and Columbus and Farragut and Franklin and Grant and Hamilton. And see, the way we taught American history was biographies, just like this. What we do today is we teach dates and places and etc. And we used to teach it by showing the eyes of the people. And what Tim was talking about, see, this 9-volume set right here, this set right there, that's the signers of the Declaration. There's 30 or 40 or 50 pages on each one of the 56 signers of the Declaration. So we call this biographical collections. You can see up here and right here. And that's one way to teach history. And by the way, WallBuilders website, we have a section for kids that's called Great American Heroes. And it's biographies of these. It's Abigail Adams, it's Booker T. Washington, it's the Wright brothers, and that's the way we used to learn history for 300 years until progressives changed it in the 1920s, and then Woodrow Wilson comes out with his history series, and now we start doing dates and names and places instead of the lives and the stories and the fun stuff. And George Washington's a young man, and he grows up, and what happens when he's a young boy in the Revolution, all the cool stuff. So that's a great way to teach history. We have that at WallBuilders.com.
Okay, so we can head back in, because there's actually some other stuff still
yeah.
on that table in that section that we'd like to identify, some pretty fun stuff. So this is a newspaper, and we actually have lots of newspapers. So this one is 1779, which is an early newspaper, but we have newspapers long before this one.
And that one's, I mean...
And it's not in good shape at all. You can see
Yeah.
it tattered and torn. So why is this one significant?
Well, you look at the articles, and there's nothing really significant in the articles for sure. And you go over here. Now, one of the things I like in these old papers, they're always 4 pages long, and seeing the want ads is a lot of fun. And, they'll have a house for sale for $4.50 kind of stuff. So it's
I
fun
could
stuff.
afford that.
You could afford
Maybe
that.
not the property tax on it, but I probably could afford to buy it.
I'll take 10, please. What's the most significant here is printed by M.K. Goddard.
Now Goddard is a name I recognize, but the M.K. So who is the M.K.?
Michael Keaton? No, that's an actor.
No, that's somebody
That's
different.
not it. Well, actually, it stands for Mary Catherine Goddard.
Mary Catherine.
She's the first female printer publisher in the United States. She published a newspaper in Philadelphia. Then she came down to Maryland, published a newspaper in Maryland.
And that's a big deal for a woman to be a publisher, to be a printer,
Oh, yeah.
to have her own newspaper. So is that maybe why?
And by the way, she's the one who printed the Declaration of Independence, first printing in Maryland. So 1776, she gets this and then prints it in Maryland. And so Mary Catherine Goddard, great part of women's history.
But is perhaps the reason that she's M.K. Goddard because she was a woman and didn't put Mary?
Yeah, maybe that's speculated, but it doesn't make much sense because she was also made the postmistress for Baltimore. Well, that's a congressional appointment.
She was pretty famous.
She
then.
was pretty out front. So people speculate. Well, she did that because she's a woman and she'll be rejected. No, she's got an official government position in Baltimore. So
there is speculation around it, but it really can't be confirmed. It's just thoughts behind it.
That's right.
But
it goes to that thing that all the founding fathers are racist and sexist. And, well, then why did they make her the postmistress for all of Baltimore?
Yeah, that wouldn't make sense.
That doesn't,
if they were really anti-woman, which is sometimes what we hear about.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay, so these are new things kind of for this section. Let's jump over to another section. This is kind
there's
of
a cool Bible. We got a new Bible in.
Yeah, this is the faith section. Now, this is a Bible that actually you picked up.
And by the way, behind you, see, all these are Bibles related to founding fathers in some way, shape, fashion, or form. Charles Thompson, and you got Elias Boudinot and Benjamin Rush, and you got John Witherspoon, and then you got Jefferson helped fund some of these. So all these are related in some way to the founding fathers. So we got a new Bible in this week.
Well, and this is something that you picked up actually over in Europe when you were over in Poland.
Yeah.
And this was a Bible. I had never seen something like this before.
Actually, I'd never seen one like it.
You brought it back and said, hey, check this out. What do you think about it?
But I kind of recognize because, I look on the outside and I recognize stuff like that. And that looks to me like about a 1796 printing. If I were guessing, I would say that Bible itself...
1790, somewhere in that frame is your guess?
Yeah, that's my guess by looking at the Bible. So I was real intrigued.
Yeah, the leather, the binding does seem kind of that era.
And the thing you want to do is open the Bible and see who published it. And so, if it's a Collins Bible, I know that's John Witherspoon, or if it's Isaiah Thomas. So I'm always looking at the inside publisher because it tells me everything
So we'll open up to see the cover page, but no.
Uh-oh.
There's a little writing on this side, but there's some kind of sheepskin. That's probably a little more modern. But inside, you've got some wooden stakes. You've got a hammer. You've got, what is this, like garlic?
That's garlic.
Garlic.
And rosary beads.
And a knife. And so this is actually...
don't you drive that in the heart?
A vampire Bible kit. So of all kind of the funny things, all of the significant, valuable historical things we have, for some reason we also have a vampire Bible kit.
And I can tell you, I wasn't expecting to see that when I opened the Bible. So that was a
So this
fun
is
one.
really just kind of a fun thing. It could be an interesting historical thing that America really didn't get into the vampire craze as much. Right. Probably some learning lessons there, but something fun related a little bit to the Bible, only in the sense of It's a shell of a Bible on the outside.
Now, this is a prayer proclamation. Caleb Strong, he's the governor of Massachusetts, and he was also a member of the Constitutional Convention. He's one of the guys who helped frame the Constitution. Now, he didn't sign it, but he did. But we got a whole bunch of these in this week, and these are called broadsides because they're so big. You literally hang these things up on the sides of buildings and etc. And this is your internet, if you will. This is how you announce to everyone. So it's a big one. And Levi Lincoln, this Levi Lincoln, that's Thomas Jefferson's Attorney General. He's the one who worked with Jefferson. So he's the governor of Massachusetts. Here's one, Edward Everett. He was the guy with Abraham Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address. You have George Bowell. So we got a whole bunch of these. We now have probably about 800 of these prayer proclamations, which again goes to show that these guys really weren't secular about government, because this is a government
or
issue
even the
call.
thought of the separation of church and state, that they didn't have the same thought we
That's
have
right.
today. Now, they knew there were separate institutions, and they actually worked to protect separate institutions, but they didn't think government should be secular,
That's
or
right.
education should be secular, or really any of that kind of stuff. So a lot different than kind of a modern perception. But yeah, we have hundreds and hundreds of these proclamations, so just kind of adding
And
more
a
to it.
bunch in this week, a bunch of them. Let's go World War II and actually military. Let's just jump over the military table for a while. What do you got?
Well, I'm going to start actually with a letter, and this was a letter, you see, Morris R. Jepson, and if you Google his name, what you will discover is that he was one of the crew members on the Enola Gay, which dropped the atomic bomb. Now, this is a letter that he wrote actually to a schoolboy who wrote him and said, hey, you know, what are your thoughts on the atomic bomb?
He wrote this in 2008. So we're now in the very, very modern era, and the modern portrayal of the atomic bomb and these guys was, you know, they just killed so many people. They felt really guilty.
And you could understand, I mean, just even kind of from a human perspective, that you might feel really awful thinking about what you've done. I mean, war is defined as hell, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a pretty thing. So the student could have a very, meaningful question, or it could be the bias of a teacher saying those guys were evil and what they did was evil. How dare they? Nonetheless, he got a letter from a student asking about what he did dropping the atomic bomb.
How do you feel about it? What do you
And
think
here was his
now?
response. He says, thank you for your letter. Answers to your questions as follow. I think about the Enola Gay Hiroshima mission only when someone asks about it. One cannot be happy or glad about a war mission that caused much loss of life and property. But we realize from historical records that the two atomic bombings quickly put an end to the war that, if continued, would likely have necessitated a very long and costly invasion. Yes, at the time, I did agree with Truman's decision and, with the benefit of years of historical knowledge, completely agree with President Truman now. Many people and their children and even their grandchildren have told me over the years that they would not have been born if the World War II had not ended on 6th of August, 1945. My best to you, Morris Jepson.
And 6th of August 45 is when they dropped that atomic bomb out of the Enola Gay, which he was one of the crew members.
Well, and identifying how many more Americans would have died had they not dropped those bombs, and therefore how many children and grandchildren wouldn't have entered the world.
If they had gone into an invasion, the estimates are on the low side, 5 million more lives, up to 14 million more lives would have been killed without the atomic bomb having been dropped. You and I have got family members in the military.
We do?
And I've had one of our brothers has been deployed 3 times, and so when it comes time to vote, he doesn't miss voting, but he's not here when he votes.
Has to be the absentee ballot.
Absentee ballot. Well, we got a hold of an absentee ballot.
Found out it's not as new as we thought it was.
This is poll book for the October election, and this happens to be from 1864. This is in the Civil War, and they are voting here. 2 military guys. They happen to be from this particular county. And
I think it's Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, it's in Pennsylvania. Let's see, the name of the Crawford County in Pennsylvania. Yeah, Crawford County. And there's 2 guys in this unit from Crawford County that voted in the county elections choosing U.S. congressmen. So it turns out absentee ballots is really not a new thing. This goes back to Civil War days.
really some pretty cool stuff. Okay, yeah, so there is a pretty popular war movie out. In fact, it's described as one of the better movies since Saving Private Ryan, and it is Hacksaw Ridge. And if you haven't seen it, it's rated R for the amount of gore in it, although probably not even the level of gore that war would be.
Yeah.
But it certainly has some graphic depictions, and the hero of that, of course, is Desmond Doss. And when the film was being made, reports came out that they couldn't even tell his full story because it's so unbelievable all that he did, all that happened. Well, we have a signed picture of...
By the way, he's a strong, dedicated Christian. He's a conscientious objector. He would not pick up a gun, but my gosh.
How many lives he saved. But yeah, so Hacksaw Ridge was the movie, but this is Desmond Doss. You see his signature down there.
And he's getting the Medal of Honor from President Truman. So that's the Medal of Honor winner. And this newspaper from 1945, October the 9th, as you open up to this article right here inside the newspaper, it has this article that says, if I can be very careful opening this, let me bend it right there. It says right here, Medal of Honor won by objector. That is the story of Desmond Doss in the New York paper getting the Medal of Honor, and you saw Truman putting it on him there. That's what this is right here.
Well, this is just a glimpse of some of the stuff that we get in. There's a lot more we've even gotten in over the last couple weeks we haven't been able to show. But we try to do videos periodically here on the Facebook page, you know, all kinds of social media. So whether you're on Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is, we encourage you guys to check it out. You'll see more of this stuff. And then periodically we hope to do more of these Facebook Lives and to show you some of this stuff. If you have questions, by all means, feel free to contact us. Let us know. We've got a website. You can email us questions there too. History questions. We'd love to try to help you and really connect you back to original sources and our own history, which we've forgotten a lot. But thanks for tuning in tonight. Hopefully we'll see you again next time.
God bless you.